Do you believe Christopher Wray really had a choice? And if so, did he make the right one?
No, I don't think he had much of a choice. President-elect Trump made it clear that he was going to replace Director Wray with Mr. Patel. I think that was a mistake. The tenure normally for FBI directors is 10 years, and the goal of that is to depoliticize the office so that it doesn't necessarily come when a new president arrives. But, President Trump decided to move against that, even though he appointed Mr. Wray 5 years ago, or previously when he was president. So it's a little ironic, but, I guess it's consistent with a lot of the nominees he's putting forward and the way he's going about it.
Well, Congressman, I'm trying to figure out what Christopher Wray did wrong, because, again, he was, of course, chosen initially by Donald Trump, who in the statement upon his resignation wrote, quote, "I just don't know what happened to him," unquote, and then quickly refers to the raid, so-called, on his home at Mar-a-Lago. Is that what this is? Was it retribution for the raid in Florida?
Potentially, and you do worry about what might be behind this and what it might indicate. I think Wray played it pretty much by the book. He seemed to be one of those guys who was just trying to do it the right way, and I didn't always agree with what he did, but I think by and large it was consistent with the way FBI directors normally conducted themselves in their offices. I'm worried that the Patel nomination will be something very different. You got an FBI director coming in with an enemies list. That's not the way that's supposed to work. So, we'll see what happens as that plays out. Patel hasn't been confirmed yet, but I've got a lot of concern about that. And the overall, sort of vibes and comments they're putting out about potentially attacking the Department of Justice overall. I think it undermines the rule of law and our approach to prosecution in this country.
Well, there was also a suggestion by the president-elect in his interview on NBC's Meet the Press last weekend that members of the House January 6th Select Committee possibly should be jailed. Do you trust in this incoming administration there will be checks within these different departments with these different nominees Trump has selected against that potential prosecution?
I don't know that there will be, and there's certainly no self-control that's going to come from President-elect Trump. I think the things he's done and said already are reason for us to be deeply concerned about how he might conduct that office. Department of Defense is another one, too, with the list or the review of generals and admirals that might force them out if they don't do loyalty oaths and the like. This is different than anything we've seen that I can recall, certainly, and maybe in the history of the country, and it's certainly taking us in the wrong direction. So I hope that, we can right that ship. I think we're going to be counting a lot on Senate Republicans to keep them on the right track. But if that fails, it's going to have to be a push. We're going to have to stand up and oppose these things in the House and the Senate, the Democrats working together. But ultimately, it'll come down to the public and the voters in 2 years. I think we're going to have to try and take back the House if this is the tack that he's going to take.
You just completed your work, Congressman, as a member of the Assassination Task Force, something we've talked to you about, of course, that task force created in the wake of the 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life. You're just out with your findings. Your report was released less than 24 hours ago, and it says the events of July 13, 2024 were tragic and preventable. The word preventable, the key there is you are, in fact, suggesting some changes that the Secret Service consider, and one of them is reducing the number of foreign leaders that are expected to be protected by the Secret Service. This comes to a head every time we have a UN General Assembly. Is that time for another agency to take on that work?
Well, one of the things the Secret Service should consider, and I think the government generally, is do they have enough resources to do the job that they're required to do, especially when the General Assembly shows up and especially in a presidential election year. I think we saw, based on this cycle, that maybe not. And so I think we're going to need to increase the resources available to the Secret Service. But we might have to take other steps as well, including, having other agencies provide protection, certainly not to the highest level of foreign officials who come, but to other levels. And also we might have to try other things too, like site selection. Picking obviously dangerous sites, I think, doesn't make a lot of sense. So we've got a number of, some are recommendations, some are things for their consideration, but they need to take an overall look and reconsider all of this. And then there are the basics of correcting the things that went wrong at Butler on July 13th. I think the Secret Service is pretty far down the road on that, but we've got to make sure they get all the way down the road on that so those types of issues never happen again.
Well, several of these recommendations, Congressman, fall under a category of for legislative consideration by Congress. Knowing what we know of the agenda of this incoming Congress and administration, the things they would like to do when it comes to the border, energy, tax reform, let alone having to deal with government funding and a debt ceiling, do you see among leadership the political appetite to address some of these questions through lawmaking in any near term?
I think so. I mean, I had a conversation with Homeland Security Chairman Green yesterday when we were having votes on the floor. He's also on the task force. And I told him I thought it would be important for our committee to follow up on some of these things that were discussed in the task force. As you know, the task force expires at the end of this week. We need standing committees like Homeland Security to keep moving forward with this. And I think they will. Judiciary is another one that could be helpful on this front. I haven't had a conversation with Chairman Jordan about it, but I think everybody understands how close this country came to chaos. If President Trump had been assassinated on July 13th, that would have been devastating for the country, and we have to make sure we do everything we can to have elections decided by ballots, not bullets, and that's going to mean a continuation of congressional oversight, but sometimes legislation too.
Got the final quacks of the lame duck here, Congressman, and it looks like you just passed the NDAA today. How about funding the government? 9 days to figure this out. Will you kick the can to March? Is that what you're expecting?
That's what I'm hearing. Obviously, this isn't the best way to govern. Passing appropriations bills in the regular order would make sense, and that's what the Republicans had said they were going to do when they took over the House about 2 years ago. Speaker Johnson said he was going to try and do that as well. They haven't been able to, but to make sure that the government stays open and that we don't default on our debts, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has stepped up, and the Democrats have worked with the Republicans to get those things done, even though you had massive Republican defections on those votes. So we're willing to make sure we get it done. Kicking it down the road 3 months, I don't think is the best way to do it, but we're going to make sure we keep the government open and keep doing the people's business that they need us to get done.
And finally, Congressman, we can't let you go without asking, as you have a seat on the House Ethics Committee, are we ever going to see that investigation into Matt Gaetz?
I can't comment on that. I'll say stay tuned, but that's about all I can say.